The divine name of God in ancient Hebrew scripture was one of the most important, but perhaps problematic texts for an ancient Jewish scribe. When we open up the Dead Sea Scrolls, we see many writings where scribes simply wrote out the Hebrew tetragrammaton, Yod, He, Vav, He, and moved on. However, there are several texts in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek that show that some scribes had different strategies, perhaps signaling their special care and consideration for the name, or even giving us insight into their increasing understanding of the sanctity attached to that name. The first text we'll look at is called 4Q Pentateuch C, and as its name suggests, this is a scroll that includes materials from Genesis through Deuteronomy, only it's remixed and recombined and even includes content that we didn't even know about before the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, when the scribe of this text came to the divine name, they in fact wrote it out in Hebrew square script, Yod, He, Vav, He, as we might expect, but they put something before it, almost like a semicolon. Now, what would this do and why did they do this? Well, we don't really know, but perhaps it served as some sort of warning or a speed bump that the next word was not to be uttered maybe in personal study or perhaps read aloud in a communal setting. So in this example, we see how two dots actually open up big questions and perhaps insights into not just scribal practice, but how a community might have thought about the divine name of God and likely the sanctity that was attached to it. When some scribes encountered the divine name of God, they defaulted to an earlier paleo-Hebrew script to express this name in a way that suggests it had increased authority, sanctity, perhaps even antiquity. We see that, for example, in this Cave 11 Psalm scroll known as 11Q Psalms A. Here we can see that there are several instances where we have that paleo-Hebrew tetragrammaton included in the text. But we also see instances in this manuscript where there are gaps, spaces left where we would expect to find that divine name. Now, why is this? Well, there could be a few different reasons and we don't really know. Perhaps it was the job of a junior level scribe to copy out a text, but leave spaces for a senior scribe to come in and add in that divine name later. Or perhaps it's just simply a scribal error where scribe A meant to go back and fill in the gap and simply didn't. Either way, what we've gained insight into here is another practice or approach for writing the divine name, as well as perhaps some insight into not just scribal processes, but maybe even their workflow and a scribal hierarchy. The Dead Sea Scrolls are trilingual. We have manuscripts in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Yet how would a scribe approach a Hebrew divine name of God when they're translating something into another language or writing a new text in another language from the ground up? We see one example of a solution in this Cave 4 copy of the Aramaic Book of Tobit. When we look at this manuscript, we do find that familiar tetrapuncta, those 4 dots where we would expect to see a divine name of God. Only in Aramaic, the divine name of God is not Yod, He, Vav, He. It seems that the scribe here was using that tetrapuncta to apply it to now an Aramaic name of God, Allah. This is interesting for several reasons, one of which shows that this scribe had some awareness and intention trying to capture the idea of that sanctity even in a new language. Our second example of Aramaic scribal culture comes from a text known as Pseudo-Daniel. Now, this is a Daniel text that was unknown to us for the better part of 2,000 years. It's incredibly important for how we understand the formation and development of the Daniel tradition. It also gives us insight into Aramaic scribal culture, for example, here as it relates to the divine name. Now, this scribe, when they came across or had to create the phrase, your God, they defaulted to that paleo-Hebrew script, only for the suffix your on the divine name God, they either didn't know or had to adapt the script to what they already knew, and it looks a little bit different. So what do we make of this? Well, here too, this is an example of where Aramaic scribal culture is trying to capture the idea as well as the authority or sanctity of what they recognized as a Hebrew divine name of God, only doing that now in a new context of compositional Aramaic. Our last 2 examples come from Greek fragments of the Septuagint that were recovered in various sites in the Judean wilderness. For example, the Minor Prophet scroll from Nahal Hever includes the running text of several of the prophets that we already know, now translated into Greek. Yet in this text, in this instance in the section of Micah, where we would expect to have a translation of the divine name, YHWH, this scribe defaults back into, once again, that paleo-Hebrew script that we've seen before. In this instance, they're not only translating, they're switching into then Hebrew, making this text somewhat bilingual, but trying to capture the essence of the sanctity of that divine name in Hebrew, now in a Greek text. We find an entirely different strategy in some Cave 4 fragments of the Septuagint, such as these ones from Leviticus. Here again, we have a translation into Greek from Hebrew, yet when this scribe encountered the divine name, they transliterated it, or translated it perhaps, into the form Iao, Iota, Alpha, Omega. This is interesting because it gives us one more way to understand how an ancient scribe could have approached the divine name, and we see this in several later generations of manuscripts as well. Perhaps this also gives us insight into Hellenistic Judaism for how some communities or readers might have pronounced the divine name Iao, or perhaps Yahoo. So in these cases, we see that translation is about far more than words on a page and moving from one language to another. It's about how do you carry ideas that are perhaps inherent to one community culture into that of another. We've just glanced across several texts in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek among the Dead Sea Scrolls, and saw that when scribes either copied or created works and had to incorporate the divine name, they could approach it perhaps differently. Now, these are not just oddities of manuscript culture or curious facts into the scribal worlds behind Scripture. Rather, they open up very important insights and questions around how ancient scribes and their reading communities thought about God, how they understood language, and the very act of writing itself. If these types of insights are interesting to you, I'd invite you to like or share this video and subscribe to this channel for more takes on ancient scribes, scrolls, and scriptures. And if you're interested in the Dead Sea Scrolls and want to dig even deeper, please do go enjoy my latest book, Lost Words and Forgotten Worlds, Rediscovering the Dead Sea Scrolls. Thanks for being here, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.